I am with Dr. Edward Oendo. He's an expert on terrorism matters, also a lecturer at Kenyatta University School of Security and Conflict Studies. We also have Tabitha Mwangi, research associate on matters terrorism as well at the Center for International and Security Affairs. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. 72 hours later, some calmness, some peace has resumed in the capital, and Kenyans are now coming to terms with what has happened, a terrorist attack, one of its kind, among the many that we have witnessed in the country. And of course, it's quite unfortunate the number has risen to 21 at this point. And our condolences to the family of those who've lost their loved ones. Thank you so much for joining us. I'll start with you, Dr. Oendo. Even as we're coming to terms with what has happened in the country, I'd like to get your assessment on, first of all, how the security organs were able to conduct themselves during this operation. It took about 18 hours.
Thank you, Zeynab. First of all, I take the opportunity to join up with the rest, the head of state and the interior minister, in sending condolences to the families of the victims of this very heinous act of terrorism. Coming back to how the security organs were able to marshal their resources and respond to this particular incident, this is a marked change. This is a great improvement, a significant improvement from what we have witnessed before. This time there was a much more coordinated evacuation exercise. Response was meticulous, and I think the security organs, the law enforcement agencies and other allied organs were able to have a much more coordinated response process this time, which means that the efforts and the policy structures that are being put in place to counter terrorism are improving by the day.
All right. Tabitha, maybe your thoughts on the same?
Just like you said, I would like to express my condolences to the families who have lost their loved ones, and keep hoping and wishing and praying that those still in hospital get to recover and are able to reunite with their families. Back to your question, I think the law enforcement agencies were able to conduct themselves in a very effective manner, because EMS, emergency medical service providers, were at the scene on time. People were evacuated. There was effective communication on what was happening. Like, the public was updated by the government at periodic, in different intervals, to keep people aware of what was happening, which has been very effective. And even how the government has talked to the public. They have come out and said, this is what we know so far, this is what we're still doing, which has helped maintain calm and peace, and even the president's message that we do not forget those people who hurt our children. So it shows that the government is improving, given past incidences where we had different terrorist incidents that took way longer than this one did.
All right. Let's talk about the question of security, and especially security checks in public spaces. We have facilities and installations, but most of the times you find that the guards at the security checks are unarmed, or maybe the policemen that have been deployed in those various public spaces do not have the requisite training when it comes to such incidences. I'll start with Dr. Oendo. Do you think we need to rethink on how to secure this very vital public spaces, especially when it comes to arming, the police people?
Yeah, that is in the domain of the situational crime prevention.
Yes.
That's what we call it. But within the context of terrorism, as a new way of crime commission, or as a new way of waging war, I think the ad hoc response to the terrorist threat that entails, for example, hardening the targets and building the environment in such a way as to prevent, minimize damage or prevent terrorist attacks. Maybe that's something which is ongoing. It's not that we'll get to a point where we will know when the terrorists are attacking. The very nature of terrorism is such that there's the surprise effect. The surprise effect and the unpredictability is part of the strategy of terrorism. So And the intention of the terrorist organizations and terrorist activities is to ambush the systems and push policy and cause maximum fear that we are all over the place. You don't know where we'll come from. So while you harden this particular target, we'll attack you from this end. So I would not urge a fixation with hardening targets or for example, preventing installations, because that's the intention. The intention is let's get you expecting us from this end, but while you wait, we'll be attacking.
Mm-hmm. You know, we were having a conversation this morning, and most of us, I would presume, in our public spaces, there are drills, you know, in terms of maybe fire emergencies or even a terror attack emergency like what we've witnessed. And most Kenyans are just okay with it. Like, they're not very, you know, educated in terms of what to do in case of such an emergency. Do you think we need more civic education when it comes to such, you know, drills and making Kenyans aware of what to do in terms of a situation that happens? Tabitha?
Yes, I think it is important that we have more awareness amongst the public. Mm-hmm. This can come from institutions doing frequent drills like you talked about, and trainings and designated leaders that are tasked with making sure that they prepare their people about what to do in the event of an attack. So for instance, assuming there's a university along Thika Road, there should be student leaders and members of faculty who know that these are the exit points, and this is what we should be able to help people do in the event of an attack. And for us to change our mindset, stop being so relaxed and thinking, oh, nothing will happen, we're safe. We need to always be prepared, because just like in cybersecurity, the terrorists will always be ahead of us if we're not careful. And unless we have frequent trainings for people to know what to do, unless we invest in technologies that help us to detect suspicious behavior and help everybody know that whenever you're in a public space and you see something that looks amiss, this is what you need to do. So for instance, in some countries, they have apps where when you see something strange that you think is very suspicious, you send a notice that goes to the police, and the police are alerted and told there's something amiss along, say, Embakasi Road, and this is what we need to expect. So I think Kenyans need to change the way they think about security and just take these things seriously, because it might be what saves your life. So for instance, after the 1993 attack on the World Trade Center, they realized, when they did their security analysis, they realized that the reason why so many people got injured was because they did not know where the escape routes were. They did not have any experience of walking in a dark staircase full of smoke and all these people that are panicking. And so what they started doing was drills every year where everybody was expected to participate, regardless of which organization you work in, regardless of what your rank is in that institution. And so when 9/11 happened in 2001, then people were more prepared in that same building to know what to do in the event of an attack. So it can definitely change how the outcomes will be in the event of an attack.
All right, and definitely even the slightest is a positive way forward. And let's talk about probably arming or giving security to individuals, or not giving security, but rather arming individuals just in case of a disaster that happens. Dr. Oendo, are you of the opinion that it would be good for the government to consider giving weapons or, you know, training individuals in the society in case of such an incident?
Now, terrorism is a unique security threat. Terrorism is a unique security threat with its unique dynamics, and we require a special understanding of it and a conceptualization of the same. Again, I'm reluctant to advocate arming populations against terrorism. I mean, that sounds a little bit hilarious. What I would agree with Tabi is that we need to rethink our entire strategy, counter-terrorism strategy, as it were, so that first of all, in fact, instead of arming the population, which is alarming the population, arming them is alarming the population. So instead of alarming the population, which is the intention, which is the ultimate intention of the terrorist strategy, we need to educate the population and demystify some of the misconceptions about what terrorism is, or what a terrorist is, or what terrorist, or what the intentions of terrorism are. I think the best way to arm the population is to educate them. Having said that, now that terrorism is an existential reality, it is something we must deal with, and it's wreaking havoc. It's wreaking havoc. If you look at the incidents, if you look at Peketoni, you go to the incident at Garissa University, that was.
Yes.
And if you think about the Uganda bombing. You notice that this is serious. So indeed, we must have an operational response system and strategy and risk management in the context of terrorism. That is to be sure. But again, that will be by way of, like Tabi was suggesting, gradually and systematically training the public on the psychology of terrorism and understanding the manifestations of terrorism. It's called, that is explained by the acronym TABI, which is Terrorist Attack Pre-Incident Indicators. The public needs to know what the threat is, or who poses the threat. What are some of the ways that terrorism will manifest or will be executed? And what are the targets, for example? What are the most likely times? Even though terrorism is sporadic, which means it has the surprise effect. It can happen and take years, 5 years, 10 years. It can be so rapid over a period and stop for a long time. That's part of their strategy. But having said that, if the public is psyched through training, then we'll be able to have a long-term strategy against terrorism. One more thing that I want to say, Zeynab, is that terrorism as such, in terms of fatalities, yes, everybody, and one life lost in an incident of terrorism is wasted life. But in terms of terrorism's desire or ultimate goal really is to cause terror, is to cause fear, is to cause despondency and hopelessness, and affect political policy in that manner. So the public needs to be demystified, really, to be re-educated, to think of terrorism in a different way. That's my take for now.
All right.
And this will involve this, Zeynab. This will involve actually probably having a program in our education system.
All right.
Training people right from preschool, probably from primary school all the way, and having specialized training, drill trainings and emergency response and risk response programs in institutions of all kinds, because terrorism will visit you anywhere, anytime.
All right. And before I get your take, Tabitha, I understand we have Nurdin El Moge from Wajir County, just to talk to us matters on security. Nurdin?
No problem. Good morning from Wajir, and Wajir County is one of the counties with sharing border with Somalia, and where most of the Kenyan problem has been coming from lately. And with me are some of the residents in Wajir who also suffered from Tuesday evening attack in Nairobi. So let me talk to them and get their reaction and suggestion on properly how the government can help improve security in the country. And Chairman, please your name.
I am Isaac Kilo Osman. I live in Wajir County. Actually, we are mourning for the incident happened. We are not happy of it. It was very, very wrong and bad part. And as Kenyans, we must stand together to make sure we fight
Thank you very much. And Zeynab Ismail, back to the studio.
All right, thank you so much, Nuruddin. It's actually Zeynab Ismail. I guess you'll be confused there. We also understand that he had a bit of a technical hitch there from Wajir County. Of course, we'll be joining him later on during the course of this broadcast. The conversation continues. And Dr. Oendo, you spoke about civic education and inculcating probably programs within the education curriculum on how to equip Kenyans from an early age on what terrorism is about, to understand and give a wider perspective of what that means. Tabitha, let's talk about that public participation as it comes, you know, as a collective responsibility in ensuring that peace is achieved and security is maintained in the country. How do we bring in all this, you know, stakeholders together, the public, you know, the private sector, and ensuring that at the end of it all we have the security that we most need in the country?
There have been efforts by the government over the last few years since the issue of terrorism in Kenya started becoming more evident, that since it became more evident that there's actually a serious threat posed by Al-Shabaab and other groups. And one of the ways that can help the public prepare for this is by having a lot of education. And there's there's ways that programs can be done so that they're broadcasted on TV, there's messages sent to people, and people are just able to demystify what terrorism is all about. People do not, so that we kill this notion that terrorism is something that is top secret, that only the government knows about, that we cannot do anything as the public until the government tells us what to do. So the more we arm people with information through the media, through education, through workshops, through engagement with the civil society, with the private sector, to see who is providing the best solutions. So for instance, which are the companies in Kenya that are not just providing us with CCTV cameras to get footage on everything that happens in institutions, but who has the smartest in terms of technology, so that we do not just have cameras that show us faces and maybe once in a while we get the audio of what happened, but we're able to use technology to effectively alert people that need to respond. Something else that needs to continue being done, which the government has been doing in the last few years, is continuing to engage with different stakeholders such as psychologists to help people understand that we have certain age groups that, or certain people that are more vulnerable to radicalization than others. So for instance, it has been seen that as much as it is very difficult to clearly say that this is a proper target for a terrorist organization, you can be able to train the community leaders to know that these are the signs that if you see portrayed by members of your population, say sons or people in universities or even high schools, you need to alert the law enforcement agencies. And that can only happen if there's a lot of research and training across the country for everybody, religious institutions to come out and say, no, as a society, we stand against this. For civic society to say, as much as we want to talk about human rights, this is what we need to know about the issue of the rights of tourist people, for instance.
All right, and you bring in a very important aspect in terms of gathering and sharing intelligence, especially from the public. Dr. Oendo, do you think that we need to up our game in terms of how we create a space for the public to share intelligence?
Even before I talk about the need to share intelligence with the public, intelligence.
Actually, the public sharing intelligence and information they have.
Great. Intelligence, by its very nature, is not something which should be widely shared.
All right.
Because then intelligence widely shared loses its essence.
All right.
But having said that, it's a three-pronged approach to anti-terrorism. It is really careful collection and management of intelligence. It is surveillance of all manner. And it's finally dealing with the genuine grievances of the sympathizing populations, as it were, like Tabitha suggested earlier. This is basically the gist of counterterrorism. I have suggested previously that terrorism seeks to even use the media to misinform or glamorize issues. It's really propaganda. And that's why, Tabi, at this stage, I want to really caution the media, you the media. You've not done enough. In fact, the media are part of the segment of society that should be re-educated on terrorist reporting.
Interesting.
And terrorist coverage.
In fact, I was going to ask later on how you felt, how you saw the media covering this particular incident compared to the other, attacks that we've witnessed. And I guess it's on the negative side from you, Dr. Oendo.
Yeah, the media, in my view, still underscored. In fact,
what points did we miss?
The security agencies outperformed the media.
All right.
But this was supposed to be a partnership. Because remember that terrorism is actually propaganda at its best.
All right.
Now, and the media is important. When the media glamorizes and says, if you look at yesterday's Nation, Tabitha, you will have noticed that the Nation was still very glamorous. And terrorism is happy with that when you say the face of terror. And then we have got pictures splashed all over with vehicles burning and blazing. I mean, that is not good reporting. That's not the best way. And I've taken media. I'm a trained media person, so I can speak with authority.
Dr. Oendo, you have a balance here where you have the media who want to give out information because, look, Kenyans have a right to information. And then you have the government agencies who are saying they performed way better than the media in terms of how they've gathered the information. This time around. Then where then do you create that balance if you felt like the media did not perform up to its par?
The media has a sworn obligation to inform the public, but the media equally has a sworn obligation to avoid terrifying the public. Because the intention of the terrorist operatives is really to create despondency and widespread fear. Please take note of that. And when the media pretends to be objective, which I understand really, that is the prime tenet of media practice, of journalism. But when those pictures come out like that, and Al-Shabaab has claimed responsibility, and the social media is abuzz with pictures. Now,
but you cannot bury your head in the sand.
Zeynab, this is serious. When you end up with only about 3-4 terrorists killed, and that's what we see in the social media, but with 21 innocent Kenyans dead, the message for the terrorists is home. That we are dangerous, that we are unmanageable, that ultimately we underperform you, we can ambush you, and we can visit more damage on you than the few of us you're able to kill. That's what I'm saying. So the media must, even as the media seeks to create a balance in reporting and so on, and being objective, in the context of terrorism, really, understanding the psychology of terrorism, the media must restrain from glamorizing, almost crediting the terrorists for what they do. That's what I'm talking about, restraint. Not that you don't inform the public.
All right, thank you, Tabitha. How do you feel the media performed? Do you also think that we failed in terms of objectivity?
The media, terrorists need the media. If we, for instance, decided as Kenyans that whenever there's a terrorist attack, we're not going to have any live coverage, we will not, as much as we need to update the nation about what is happening, we need to do it within parameters that do not work in the favor of the terrorist organizations. So for instance, when the attack first happened, there were lots of journalists on the ground taking photos and saying what they thought was happening before there was even any information from the government, which is dangerous because the population listens to what the media says first. And because of some unfortunate events in the past, there might be some distrust between the population and the government. And so when the media start saying that, oh, this is what we've seen, this is what we're seeing on the ground, and the government has not yet said anything because they have not fully analyzed the situation and come to a conclusion based on what they have seen, then the media is doing an injustice to the government and to the population. Having said that, I am all for access to information for the citizens, freedom of the media to report, but then the media, just as they're part of the society, as the fourth estate, they have a mandate to protect issues that might pose a threat to the country's security.
Right.
So before you report that it is a terrorist attack, let's wait for the government to actually tell us this is what we have seen. If you're going to share information about how many people have been killed so far, let it be verified by what the government is saying, so that we do not have a case where what the media is saying and what the government is saying is different, because if that happens, then it means that we will be spreading more fear amongst the population, which is not the intention of the media.
All right. Although I would like to disagree with that opinion, I felt like the media this time around kept to the facts and did wait for the information from the government, and there was no much speculation in terms of what was happening. But
over time, I
Yes.
think what happened this time was when the event was, like, when the attack started, that is when there was a rush by the media to say exactly what was happening. But then as time went by, then I
Yes.
think there was a major shift, and even on social media,
Exactly.
because you could see people tweeting and saying, please do not call people inside the building, please do not say, for instance, share photos, and the media and the public seems to have taken cue based on what the media did. So I will say it is a learning process for all of us, for the government,
Indeed.
for the public, for the media. They have tried, but we can still do much better. And
Indeed.
this can only happen if there is enough awareness in the society, like everybody involved, that this is what the terrorists want, this is how they think, this is what they seek to achieve. So when everybody is on the same page with that, then we are all working together without having to feel like the media and the government are not on the same side.
all right. And of course, Dr. Oendo, before we got into the conversation, we were discussing on matters of sharing intelligence, the public, creating the safe spaces for the public to be able to share, intelligence and information with the relevant authorities. Do you think we have that?
Thank you. Actually, I almost lost that point, and it was very important. As I said,
Yes.
three ways of countering terrorism is intelligence, management, and so on, and then the surveillance, which is more like operational. Intelligence is more strategic. Now, the public cannot be incorporated really. The public can be a source of important intelligence on terrorism. And this is because the public needs to be armed also to be able to play a part in counterterrorism. That's important. And that, I think that the government of Kenya is doing a bit of that, using the Nyumba Kumi initiative and stuff like that, and community policing. I think that's being, something is being done to that effect. Now, surveillance is important. Surveillance is important because then we are able to, that is the only way to observe pre-terrorist attack, what we call terrorist attack, pre-incident indicators. When the public is educated on some of the signs, the behavior, the profile of the typical terrorist or terrorist group before they're able to stage an attack, then the public is able to share that information and say, we are looking at suspicious behavior of certain people look in a particular way, whom we can profile in a particular way. And then the responsible authorities are able to use that information as part of intelligence. And that information, Zeynab, must be analyzed. It must be analyzed because, again, we don't want to end up with a situation where entire populations or segments of society are profiled, or people are just victimized because they look in a particular way. That's the intention of terrorism. That we want it to appear like we are victims. That we terrorists are actually victims or martyrs, people with legitimate intentions and the views to voice. Nobody listens to us. And you see, when we deal with the grievances of the sympathetic populations, that is now part of deradicalization, systematic deradicalization, because these terrorists have got legitimate intentions, and this is what we must demystify today. Terrorism has got legitimate intentions. Terrorism is not madness or lunacy. Terrorism is not grandiose behavior without a purpose. Terrorism is not irrationalism. These are human beings with even families, with ambitions, with desires to live a good life in the now and in the hereafter. If you can understand that, then you will know that behind a single terrorist that is willing to go out there and stage an attack are 1,000 sympathizers. So can we address these grievances with the mainstream population, the population that is willing to debate these things in the public space? So addressing those grievances in that manner is a good strategy at deradicalization. Surveillance have explained how it works. Intelligence is a technical area. We need people that are schooled in intelligence, like here, like Oendo here,
Like Dr.
and Tabitha
Oendo.
here.
All right.
To be, and the government actually, we are willing to even give services pro bono. We are willing to come in and assist the government without being paid.
Fantastic.
To analyze intelligence and to strategize on how terrorism intelligence can be harnessed and be utilized in a particular way and be consumed in a professional way.
All right.
Thank you.
Tabitha, do you also agree that we need to improve our capacity in terms of de-radicalization?
The Kenyan government over the last few years has made a lot of changes in how they deal with the issue of terrorism as a phenomenon. And some of the things they have done have included working very closely with community members, such as religious institutions, civic organizations, schools and families, to help flag suspicious behavior, to help give information about people who start changing their lifestyle. For instance, people who start becoming more, what will I call, extremist in their views, and more, if I could use the word, angry and almost seeming irrational, because like he said, terrorists are not a bunch of foolish people like people like to think. They know exactly what they're doing. They do a SWOT analysis for everything they do. Because remember, at the end of the day, it is almost like, it is just an organization like any other corporation, just like Nation Media Group, just like any organization that you can think of out there, and they have a brand to maintain. So the best way to be able to ensure that the population is able to cooperate with the government is to continue making it, like creating safe spaces for people to report, which has been happening in a lot of hotspots in Kenya. There has been a lot of efforts by the government to slightly move away from counterterrorism, which is often seen as the use of force, to PV and CV, which is countering violent extremism and preventing violent extremism. This is going to help change the way people think about terrorism. And when it comes to the issue of addressing grievances, yes, there's grievances amongst the population, but there's better ways of people airing the grievances than taking up arms. If that was the case, then we will be having terrorists fighting in the name of getting land. We will be having farmers forming their own little terrorist organizations to fight for farmers' payment on time. And given that now Kenya has a new constitution that talks about devolution, and the resources are now being taken back to the communities instead of coming from the central government, I think the population needs to understand that as much as some regions might be marginalized and might be a bit behind in terms of development, it is now up to them to sit down as different counties, as regions, to think how best can we work with what we have to protect our people. Because remember, as the government, when anybody poses a threat to your citizens, you have every right to use whatever means you can to protect your citizens. And therefore it is for community members to know that if my son becomes radicalized and I do not report that on time, and the government finds out that he is actually posing a threat, then I end up losing my son, for instance. So how best can mothers and teachers and religious leaders and people working in different organizations come together to sit down and say, this is what the ideal terrorist looks like. this is what you need to look out for. The minute you see this, these are the right people to talk to. And because the government is getting a lot of information from all the surveillance they're doing, from the different sources they have on the ground, it is important that the public keeps giving whatever information they can. When you see something, say something, because that might be what makes a difference between being able to intervene before the attack happens.
All right. And Dr. Oendo, of course, with your last remarks, have you seen a change intact in terms of how the terrorists perform the attacks? And have we aligned ourselves in terms of how we're able to respond to such attacks? And what do you feel is the best way to improve the state of security in light of what has happened and in light, of course, of terror attacks in the country?
Great. In terms of methods, and in terms of organization and methods, and even ideology, terrorism is changing and mutating over time. And I think it's part of the grand plan, the grand strategy, that again, if we become predictable, then we cannot be able to execute our mission on a sustainable basis. And because they have to deploy minimum resources and have maximum, especially media coverage and effect, then they mutate. Terrorism, in terms of methods and strategy, is mutating. That's a fact. That is why, in terms of policy also, and operational procedures, the government, the anti-terrorism agencies, have to also keep mutating or improving their methods, as it were. But I think this cannot be achieved. This can't be achieved better. It can't be achieved better than in the area of intelligence management. That is the crux of it. Everything else we do will not make the difference until we are able to up our ante in the area of intelligence. Because really, even these methods, these mutating approaches to terrorist activities, you only understand them if you are able to infiltrate those cells, if you are able to mingle with the population. And remember that terrorists are now diffuse. They're all over the place. They're all over the place. They are part of society. They're embedded, as it were, in terms of ideology and the individual operatives. So what we do, have an intelligence system that is dynamic, that is busy improving, and that is long-term. In other words, it must be strategic. It's actually strategic intelligence management in the face of terrorism. Any ad hoc approach to either radicalization, deradicalization, or anti-terrorism is want to flop. Because again, terrorism is busy mutating and changing in methods, and terrorism is not going to go away. So we better be realistic and have a strategy against it.
All right, thank you. Tabitha, your last remarks.
I would like to agree with him. Terrorist organizations want to remain being unpredictable. They want to keep us in fear, always looking behind our backs to see if they're going to strike, to live on edge so that they can achieve their political goals. But the best way that the law enforcement agencies can counter these is by trying to understand more about what these people are up to. So for instance, Al-Shabaab has been changing from just being a terrorist organization into now carrying out guerrilla attacks, not guerrilla attacks, I'm forgetting the word. What's the word for it?
What is it, guerrilla?
They're no longer just doing impromptu attacks, and they're now moving away from, anyway, it has
It will come back, yes.
I will remember it. But I think as they change, because they have to remain relevant. If they, for instance, go underground for 10 years and they do not keeping us in fear, then they start becoming irrelevant. They start losing their sympathizers. And so as they change tactic and become more decentralized, yes, that's the word I was looking for, decentralized, and no longer like having a core leadership and chain of command, to having different cells doing different things in different places. Yes,
The
yes.
team approach.
The team approach. I think the government also needs to keep learning about these organizations. And this is what they have been doing. I think it would be unfair for us to not commend the government for what they have been doing, because I know, for instance, the National Counterterrorism Center has been doing a lot of work in terms of research and policy, strategic policy making to help the government really understand this is what these people are saying. And the way we can do this best is through information.
All right.
Let the people know this is what Al-Shabaab aims to do. This is what ISIS elsewhere aims to do. This is what Boko Haram intends to do. And this is what we need to prepare for, because when the government starts using force and employing all these tactics to counter them, they will have to find a way to survive. So we also have to remain flexible enough as policymakers, as the government, and as the public and the media and everybody involved, to know that as they change tact, we also have to be flexible to do the same for our own survival.
All right, definitely. Thank you so much, Tabitha Mwangi, Research Associate on Terrorism Matters from the Center for International and Security Affairs. We also had Dr. Edward Oendo, an expert on terrorism matters, also a lecturer at the Kenyatta University School of Security and Conflict Studies. Thank you so much for coming in this morning. But of course, we'll be taking a look at what is happening on that Riverside attack whose operation ended yesterday. And of course, we understand that the number of people who've lost their lives has risen to 21. But we'll be keeping you updated on what is happening. We'll also be listening into what Sean Kadavilis has for us on the sports world. And we're going to take a very short break. But when we come back, remember that task force that was formed by the Ministry of Agriculture to take a look at what issues are bedeviling the sugar sector. We're supposed to begin today on the public participation, but that has been suspended. We'll be linking up with our very own Oko Kusa from Kisumu to give us an update on what is happening. Let's take a break. We'll be back. Thank you so much for watching.